Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada. Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol. Jaya Vishupad Paramahamsa Padavirajakata Astatar Satahistavanga Shila Asi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Histavanga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Inantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Shri Radha Govardhana Ki Jai, Shri Krishna Balaram Giriraj Shingadev Ki Jai, Shri Gaurnitai Ki Jai, Nitya Gaura Brahmanandi, Hare Hare, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Gauranga Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, everyone, and welcome to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. We are reading from Yeah, let's have a look if this is going to work. Yeah, okay. We are reading from the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 22. Let's see if it's going to come up. Yes, very good. The marriage of Kardama Muni and Devahuti, and we are up to text 17. Okay, here we go. Please repeat after me. Yam harmya prishte kvanarangri sobam vikridatim kanduka vivalaksham visvavasurnyapata svadvimanad Vilokya samoha vimudacheta Yam harmya prishte kvanarangri sobam Vikridatim kanduka vivalaksham Visvavasurnya patat svadvimanad Vilokya samoha vimudacheta Yam harmya prishte kvanarangri sobam Vikridatim kanduka vivalaksham Visvavasurnya patat svadvimanad Vilokya samoha vimudacheta. Okay, would somebody like to lead the chanting, please? Yam harmya prishte kvanarangri shobham Vikridatim kanduka vivalaksham Yam harmya prishte kvanarangri shobham Some of our ladies would like to. Harmya prishte kvanarangri shobham Vikridatim kanduka vivalaksham Vishvavasurnya patat svadvimanad Vilokya samoha vimudacheta. Anyone else? Yam harmya prishte kvanarangri shobham Vikridatim kanduka vivalaksham Vishvavasurnya patat svadvimanad Vilokya samoha vimudacheta. Okay, here we go. Synonyms, please repeat. Yam, whom, harmya prishte, on the roof of the palace. Kvanat angri shobham, whose beauty was heightened by the tinkling ornaments on her feet. Vikridatim, playing. Kanduka vivala akshem. With eyes bewildered, following her ball. Vishvavasu. Nyapatat fell down. Svat from his own. Vimanat from the airplane. Vilokya seeing. Samoha vimudacheta whose mind was stupefied. Okay, here we go, translation. I have heard that Vishvavasu, the great Gandharva, his mind stupefied with infatuation, fell from his airplane after seeing your daughter playing with a ball on the roof of the palace, for she was indeed beautiful, with her tinkling ankle bells and her eyes moving to and fro. Translation, please repeat. I have heard that Vishvavasu, the great Gandharva, his mind stupefied with infatuation, fell from his airplane after seeing your daughter playing with a ball on the roof of the palace, for she was indeed beautiful, with her tinkling ankle bells and her eyes moving to and fro. Okay, here we go. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. It is understood that not only at the present moment, but in those days also, there were skyscrapers. Herein we find the word harimya prishte. Harimya means a very big palatial building. Svad vimanat means from his own airplane. It is suggested that private airplanes or helicopters were also current in those days. The Gandharva Vishvavasu, while flying in the sky, could see Devahuti playing ball on the roof of the palace. Ball playing was also current, but aristocratic girls would not play in a public place. Ball playing and other such pleasures were not meant for ordinary women and girls. Only princesses like Devahuti could indulge in such sports. It is described here that she was seen from the flying airplane. This indicates that the palace was very high. Otherwise, how could one see her from an airplane? The vision was so distinct that the Gandharva Vishvavasu was bewildered by her beauty, and by hearing the sound of her ankle bangles, and being captivated by the sound and beauty, he fell down. Kardama Muni mentioned the incident as he had heard it. Let's do some invocations. Naranayam namaskritya, naram chaiva naratamam, devim saraswatim vyasam, tato jayo mudirayat, nashta prayeshva padrisha, nityam bhagavate sevaya, bhagavachutama shloke, bhaktir bhavati naishtiki, amma gyati mirandasya, ganandana shalakaya, chakshurun militam dina, tasmai shri gurve namaha, Shitatam Yamanobistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Svapadantikam. Jai Hare Krishna. So, this is quite an interesting shloka and a very nice purport, as always, by Srila Prabhupada. Right. So, the word Srila Prabhupada has chosen for the translation of Samoha Vimuda Cheta is stupefied. Right? So the word Samoha on its own means to be deluded or bewildered, and Vimuda means to be foolish, and the word Cheta means one's conscious mind. So together the words, there's Samoha Vimuda Cheta, it means to be overcome with delusion, right? And the English word stupefied specifically means that one cannot actually think properly, right? So this actually gives us some indication of just how attractive and how beautiful Devahuti was, to have this totally overwhelming effect on Vishvavasu, the Gandharva. So Vishvavasu, he was one of the leading Gandharvas. I think it said he was actually one of the chiefs. And, you know, Gandharvas themselves are noted for their extreme beauty and glamour. And Gandharvas are, of course, musicians. They are singers from the upper material planets, the celestial planets. And they are actually the beings that the Christians refer to as angels, the singing angels. So specifically, yes, we know that Vishvavasu, he is a chief amongst the Gandharvas, and Krishna says in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam that actually amongst the Gandharvas he is represented by Vishvavasu. So, you know, what this means is that Vishvavasu is a kind of a prominent Gandharva. He has a good profile, shall we say. He has a good social standing, certainly amongst his own people. But still, when he saw the beautiful Devahuti, he lost his composure due to her beauty. So now in our pastime today, yeah, we do hear, so Vishvavasu, he was flying in his vimana over the earth. So for those of you who may not know vimanas, this is the Sanskrit word for the ancient flying crafts, right, going back into previous yugas. And actually, there are many pastimes in the Srimad Bhagavatam in which we hear about the vimanas, and also we hear about activities that were carried out on earth by various demigods and great rishis and great munis and other celestial persons. So, you know, it is perhaps not so surprising that we are hearing in today's shloka that, okay, we have a Gandharva, all of a sudden he's flying over the earth planet in his vimana. And in today's shloka, Kardama Muni is actually speaking to his future father-in-law, Swayambhuva Manu, and he is extolling the virtues of the beautiful Devahuti, about how suitable she is as a bride. Her qualities are suitable for one to be his wife. And so he mentions this episode when Vishvavasu happened to see Devahuti and fell from his aircraft. Now, let's have a little bit of a closer look at this. So in Srila Prabhupada's purport, he is commenting that the word harmya, it refers to a very big palatial building. And this description, it actually has significance, right? If we look at some of the artists' depictions, right, of ancient palaces here on the screen, these are, you know, according to various details that are given in the Vedas, we can see that these structures, they bear a remarkable resemblance with today's fancy palaces, right? Here's another slide. So on the left here, we have one of our modern palatial structures, and on the right, we have the one that represents ancient Indian palaces. So, you know, certainly there will be some differences in terms of the specifications of these structures. You know, perhaps the decorative features will be different, perhaps the materials that were used in designing and in constructing these buildings, but still, you know, there is not so much difference that the two different styles cannot be put side by side and compared with each other, right? And also in today's purport, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning the aircraft, right? So these types of aircrafts, Prabhupada says they were prevalent in Satya Yuga. That means more than 3 million years ago, just as they are today in Kali Yuga. And so again, we have on the left, we have our modern aircraft, and on the right, we have the vimanas, the various descriptions of the vimanas in various pastimes. And again, we can see that, you know, some of the specific features will differ, some of the characteristics of the design and perhaps in building the vimanas, but generally, aircraft from the different yugas, again, they are not so different that they cannot be put side by side and compared, right? So aircraft from ancient days, they were designed for similar, if not the same purposes as today's aircraft, right? And they did take into consideration such as the comfort of the passengers, the speed of the flight, the maneuverability, Some of these are actually mentioned in the Ramayana when there is discussion about the Pushpa Vimana, on which Sita, Ram, Lakshmana and their entourage flew back to Ayodhya after Lord Ram had killed Ravan. So now it is said that Lord Brahma, right, who is the engineer of our universe, he had actually developed several vimanas for some of the other demigods, and the shape of these, they use various features that incorporated designs that had wings, for example, that were in the shape of peacocks, like peacocks' wings and eagles and swans. And other vimanas were said to be developed for the wiser human beings by great seer of Vedic knowledge at that time, and we know that from our various pastimes in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So I want to read you all a couple of excerpts that give specific descriptions of the Vimanas from the different ages. Excuse me. Right, so, okay, now we're going to read, this is from Krishna book, right, from the chapter, The Battle Between Shalva and the Members of the Yadu Dynasty. Right, so this is the excerpt. Pradyumna, we know Pradyumna is Krishna's son to Rukmini. Pradyumna immediately counteracted the mystic demonstration occasioned by the airplane of Shalva, the king of Soba. By the mystic power of the airplane, Shalva had created a darkness as dense as night, but Pradyumna all of a sudden appeared like the rising sun. But still, the airplane occupied by Shalva was very mysterious. It was so extraordinary that sometimes many airplanes would appear to be in the sky, and sometimes there were apparently none. Sometimes the plane was visible and sometimes not visible, and the warriors of the Yadu dynasty were puzzled about the whereabouts of this particular airplane. Right, so that's from Dwarpa Yuga. That's really, in cosmological time, that's really just around the corner from Kali Yuga, where we are now. Okay, and this is an excerpt, this time we're discussing the Pushpaka Vimana from Treta Yuga. This is an entry from a Back to Godhead article from 2011 in the database. I couldn't quite catch the author. So it says, Vibhishan, right, we know who Vibhishan is. This is Ravan's youngest brother. Vibhishan swiftly brought the Pushpaka chariot, the astounding vehicle that Ravan had stolen from Kuvera. It was built by Vishvakarma, right? Vishvakarma is one of our celestial architects. It was built by Vishvakarma, mostly from gold. Its seats were made of Vaidurya manis, gems that display different colors, and the mental indications of its driver were enough to direct it anywhere. Right, so these, they're actually describing an aircraft that flew according to the will of the driver, simply by thought. And we also hear, of course, that there are vimanas that flew by mantra. Now let's go even further back to Satya Yuga. Right, so now with regards to Satya Yuga, there is some different information as to whether vimanas were actually being produced in the Satya Yuga. But what is certain, what we do know, that in today's shloka, right, which happened in Satya Yuga, so this pastime with Devahuti, it's happening in Satya Yuga. Here all of a sudden we have a Gandharva coming down from the upper material planets in his Vimana. So at least, in Satya Yuga, the Vimanas were prevalent in the upper material planets. And of course we also know from the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj, right? So Dhruva Maharaj's pastime also occurred in Satya Yuga. And Dhruva was, of course, escorted to Dhruvaloka, which is the pole star, in a special kind of a spiritual airplane. It was Nanda and Sananda came down, and Nanda and Sananda, they came down in this special airplane, and they are, of course, confidential associates of Lord Vishnu. So, there's plenty of evidences of aircraft being used throughout the Earth's history, dating back millions of years. Now, the significance of this, it is quite astounding actually for us to hear about this, and the reason why I'm going to discuss in a minute. But, as students of Srila Prabhupada, as disciples of Srila Prabhupada, we already know, right, because it's written in the Vedas that dating back millions of years ago, yes, there certainly were very advanced human civilizations, and the technology in those times was very advanced, right? So we already know this. And we could also say that, we can safely assume from what we read in the Srimad Bhagavatam that populations in those times, they were faced with the same, if not similar, existential challenges as what we are today. But rather, the most profound aspect of this that I find, and this is what I actually want to discuss mostly today, is that today's academics and scientists and historians and educators, they are in gross ignorance about the true history of our planet, and they are also in ignorance about the history of civilizations and cultures, and specifically technology that has existed over millions of years, and that these kinds of evidences and testimonies that are recorded in the Vedas, right, and they are also recorded in certain other ancient literatures that we find around the world, like literatures that existed before our Kali Yuga. All of these types of evidences, they are more or less being dismissed as mythology today. Right? This is very sad. Srila Prabhupada discusses this. That means that they are being dismissed as fantasy. So I'm going to discuss this today, and also what is causing this unfortunate set of circumstances. So, as I was showing on these slides, right, there actually exists more similarities than differences when we are looking at some of the evidences of these structures, like palatial buildings and also aircraft. They are actually historical records, we could say. Like, they are records by scholars in the past, but they are not taken seriously. Like, if these kinds of records and narrations were taken seriously, more seriously by today's scientists in particular, then we would see the world at large today paying a lot more attention to what is recorded in the Vedas. But sadly, we don't really see that today, neither by our educators nor by our politicians. So, right, today's scientists, they maintain great desires to appear to be professional and appear to be very expert in delivering factual knowledge about the earth to the earth. But because their own desires are contaminated by selfish motivations, instead of delivering accurate knowledge, they actually end up delivering the products of those very desires, which means that they are delivering information that is largely misconstrued, right, especially about the history of the earth. A lot of it is inaccurate, or it is certainly incomplete, right, especially about the causal agents that are underpinning the workings of the universe, as well as the human body and what to speak of human consciousness. They do not understand the role of consciousness within the living beings, and they don't understand that the quality of consciousness of living beings is what largely predicts their destiny. I remember being in, I think I was down at the University of Tasmania, and I was just checking out some of the standard biology textbooks. These are textbooks with like 500 or 700 pages about the functioning of living beings. And I was looking up how much was really in there about the topic of consciousness, right? Because we know from the Vedas that it is consciousness that actually makes the whole body function at all. And, in these books of many hundred pages, there was like 2 or 3 paragraphs only about consciousness, and it didn't really say that much apart from, okay, well, you're conscious, when you're awake you're conscious, and when you're asleep, well, then you're not conscious. This was the main discussion on the topic of consciousness. So, sadly, these individuals who the world is placing their faith in, these are the individuals that society is depending on to lead civilization towards prosperity and happiness. But, as Srila Prabhupada says, it is simply a case of the blind leading the blind, because in Kali Yuga, the educators of society, right, the academics and the scientists, they are actually just as bewildered as the general population. Right? And because all of them are maintaining material desires, right? And when material desires are prioritized over spiritual desires, then the results of activity is increased suffering. This is unavoidable. So without giving any credit to the Supreme Lord, who is the real inventor, who is the real creator, they claim it for themselves, and they bask in the glory of the admiration that the world gives them. Sadly, this is the situation. So let's have a look at this next slide. So we may entitle this slide, "The Face of Kali Yuga," because in this age, all of these 12 descriptors that you can see on the screen, all of them are highly relevant to all people within all circumstances at all times. Not just to some people within some circumstances sometimes, no, to all people within all situations at all times. And because this is so, right, when Kardama Muni says in his shloka, hey, 3 million years ago there was a Gandharva flying in a Vimana over the Earth planet, and he happened to see this beautiful maiden playing on the roof of a great palace. Right? When Kardama Muni says this, this is not actually taken as factual information by our historians and educators, sadly. So we don't need to refer to today's particular shloka to discuss this phenomenon, because the Srimad Bhagavatam is actually full of events of where we have celestial beings from the upper material planets coming and interacting with the inhabitants here on our Earth planet, right? But today's historians, right, they will insist that it is really only within our own current modern era in which we had these sophisticated dwellings, this sophisticated technology. They will admit, they will go back to, maybe 10,000 years, 20,000 years. They say, okay, we have the pyramids, yeah, we know that, there's disagreement about whether the pyramids were built 4,000 years ago or 12,000 years ago. That's been going on for some time, these disagreements. But if you go back to, say, past 20,000 years, today's researchers will say, well, no, there is no way that we could have had sophisticated and advanced civilizations beyond those dates. So let's have a look a bit closer. Today's educators and scientists, they are heavily immersed in, right, which guna? Couldn't hear. Rajagun, thank you, yes, Rajagun. I mean, Tamagun is there also, but Rajagun is the one that predominates this speculative type of intellectual endeavors. Right? It is causing academics and people engaged in tertiary studies, that it causes them to rely on their own bodily senses and certainly on their own limited material intellectual capacities. Which means that they cannot deliver the whole picture about anything, really, not even the human body, what to speak of the world and the universe. Right? They have no knowledge on Paramatma, for example. They have no knowledge on Lord Krishna, as the creator and the maintainer and the controller of the material universes. And I could go on more about what they don't have, but in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, this speculative type of knowledge by which a person is looking upon other living beings from the material platform, right? That means that they are looking at other living beings from the platform of duality. Yes, this is a very prominent absorption in Rajagun, the mode of passion, and we know that activities that are carried out in the mode of passion, they end in further suffering and bewilderment for the living beings. Right? And one very prominent feature of Rajagun is the characteristic of desiring, I mean, I would even go so far as saying craving fame and social prestige and recognition. And this intense desire on behalf of the scientific community and the historians, it is creating this illusion that what contemporary researchers are achieving, this represents the peak of human civilization, right? In other words, that their discoveries are giving humankind the best information that has ever been available to humankind, right? And this is the delusion, very strong delusion, that is caused by the material energy affecting the consciousness of people who are functioning in Rajagun. And consequently, today's educators and scientists, they produce literature about the history of the world that is largely inaccurate, or at least it is incomplete. Most of it is irrelevant to the well-being of jivas, and certainly it is insufficient in delivering living beings from suffering that is caused by being in this material atmosphere that we are currently in. Right? But, you know, it is not that these individuals cannot produce any factual information about the material world. Obviously, we know that there is a lot of data, there is a lot of information out there that is accurate about, shall we say, the immediate workings of our immediate environment. Right, we can say it like that. But the most essential facts, specifically about the origins and the functioning of the human body and our planet, that information remains beyond the grasp of today's scientists. And of course, the information that is totally missing, it is that the information that is actually most critical and most essential for leading individuals towards lasting happiness and well-being. And of course, I'm talking about knowledge of our dear Krishna, knowledge of the Supreme Lord and his role in creating and sustaining and controlling material nature as we do it, as we know it, and what to speak of him being present in the heart of every living being. So, consequently, the Earth's ancient texts, they become discarded as fiction. They are not accepted as containing superior sources of knowledge from superior intellectual sources and from superior scientific sources, which they actually are. So, I remember a few years ago I came across a news item. Right? There was a scientist who had discovered a new species of bacteria, and he was very, very excited about this because he knew that this discovery, it would lead him to fame amongst the, within the world of scientists and chemists. So, in his happiness about this, he decided to have the new species of bacteria named after him. Right. I have since discovered that there are several species of bacteria and germs and viruses that have been named by the people who found them. Right? And this is actually quite remarkable. This is Rajagun, at its best, we could say. People's desire for fame and recognition is so great that they will happily give their name to entities such as these degraded life forms that spend their life swimming around in stool and urine just so that they can have a claim to fame, right? And be known as esteemed pioneers in scientific discoveries. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his Sri Bhakti-aloka, he says that amongst all things that the materially ensnared soul strives for, pratishta. This pratishta, it is which means an intense yearning or striving for recognition and fame. This is pratishta. This, according to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is the lowest of all types of yearnings, and it is very, very difficult for the materially embodied jiva to give up. So, Srila Prabhupada, he has stated very concisely in his purport today that yes, skyscrapers and helicopters and private airplanes, etc. They did indeed exist millions of years ago. And as Vaishnavas, we accept Srila Prabhupada's statements. We have no reason to doubt Srila Prabhupada, and we also have no reason to doubt the commentaries of all our previous Vaishnava Acharyas. The Vaishnava Acharyas, they do have the ability to be able to see clearly and to distinguish fact from fantasy, and they also have the ability to deliver divine, superior knowledge to this earth for the benefit of all living beings. And certainly one of our duties as Vaishnavas is actually to uphold the legacies of our past acharyas and to teach the world at large that the information that is presented in the Vedas, it is not fantasy, it is not inaccurate, and it is not exaggerated, but it actually does represent the truth as it is. Okay, so I'm going to finish up there. That's all that I had prepared for today. And just wondering if anyone would like to make a comment or if they have a question on this topic. Yes, Kishori?
Haribol, thank you so much for the beautiful class, Mother Padma. So I wanted to say two things.
Yeah.
The first is that, among scientists, what you have described is certainly true for the majority. And, I have been obviously in the medical field for a long time. So I've come across scientists who've also been in the mode of goodness. And, when they come to the point, names, I can't think of names right now, but, when they come to the point, for example, of explaining, like there's an atom. We know atoms from the Bhagavad Gita. And an atom is like the smallest building block of anything. And then when they come to describing, like, there's a neutron, there's a proton, there's a nucleus, which is the center of the atom, but inside the nucleus there's a nucleolus, which is the center of the atom. And what powers the nucleolus, we know, is Krishna, but they haven't been able to figure it out. And, they've been humble enough to admit that. So that's one thing. The other thing is, when it comes to the point of where spirituality meets material creation, there have been many scientists, who've sort of admitted defeat and said, "Oh, I can't explain this," sort of thing. So that's what I found in my sort of journey so far in the medical spheres. The other thing I wanted to say is actually a bit interesting. It's a personal experience. It's about Vimanas. And so what happened is in 2023, early November, I was coming back from, I think I saw a Vimana, basically. And to give you the conclusion first. And I think it wasn't from the higher material planets, but from the lower material planets. And it was really interesting because I put a lot of thought into it, and that's the only conclusion I could come to. So I'll just describe what I experienced. So I was coming back from Bali, and it was an overnight flight, and from Bali to Australia takes 6 hours, and 5 to 6 hours. And so the plane landed in Brisbane at 5 a.m. So it was a genuine overnight flight. And so it was about 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and the moon was really high in the sky. I had a window seat and my mother was next to me. And it was a beautiful bright moon. You could actually see the moon reflected on the sea below. It was a clear night. And so, I was really admiring the view, having the moon high and seeing the reflection so far below and trying to see if I could see any, lights on the sea or things like that. There are a lot of fishing boats in Bali, actually. So I was trying to see, but it was too high up, so I couldn't. So around 3 hours into the flight, what happened is I saw this big structure and it was right next to the plane. Pretty close to the plane. It was actually reddish, rusty colored. And it had, it was exactly like the UFO pictures look like. And, so it was like two semicircles, two full circles, a little bit irregular. It had light bulbs all around it, the globe light bulbs all around, looked like that. And my mind thought, what is this? Is this a big ship? A big cruise liner that I'm seeing, because that's what it looks like. A cruise liner has lots of lights around, And then I thought, no, I can still see the sea right far below. That's the sea there. This is actually high up. And then I thought maybe it's a satellite, but a satellite would be too high up. So it wasn't, the plane doesn't fly that high. And then I thought, oh, maybe it's whatever it is. But then my mom looked out and she said, what is that? And then the person in front of me started looking as well. And then I was about to grab my phone, but I thought if I look away, that thing's going to disappear. So I won't grab my phone. So I kept looking out, and all of a sudden, in a sudden burst of speed, it kind of just disappeared, wrapped up in some clouds. And to my mind, when I read the description in the Krishna book of this demon who was attacking Dwarka, and he was attacking somewhere, Salva, wasn't it? Yeah, and he had his reddish, rusty-colored airplane, which was made by the demons. To me, it looked exactly like something like that, and I was convinced that this is the whole material creation, and there are 14 planetary systems. We are in the middle. There's the higher ones. We know all about Vimanas from the Bhagavatam, and we also know about the spacecraft and the Vimanas from the lower planets. And so in my mind it was like, wow, this is amazing. And materially speaking, like there have been UFO sightings, but like you were describing in your class, people don't really know because of bewilderment exactly where to place that. But because we have this higher knowledge from the scriptures, we can actually understand it. Thank you. I just wanted to share that.
Jai, thank you so much for that, Kishori. That was absolutely interesting. And I, for one, believe you 108% that you actually did see a Vimana. No, I'm utterly convinced. Thank you so much. We have, there are people around the world, as we know, who are totally fixed in their testimonies that they have also had interactions with what today we call them UFOs. But, sadly, they don't really understand very much about them because they don't understand the planetary systems. And as we were discussing, they don't really know the history, of this earth and just how, the very prominent role that Vimanas have played in the earth's history as well. They don't know that. But thank you so much for that comment. And just getting back to the very first comment that you made about, some scientists are in the mode of goodness. I also found that at the University of Tasmania, that some of the individuals that I was interacting with, just a very few of them, they are philosophical to the point that they have a bigger vision, a broader vision. But the but is that because the majority of the scientific community, it's all running on empirical research, and what that means is that they are publishing and they are teaching, going all the way down to our school kids. They are teaching about, especially on topics such as history and biology, things that have got huge gaps in it in terms of factual information. And we all know, I don't know if any of you follow the ID discussion, intellectual, what is it called? Again? Intelligent design, thank you. That, going back 10 or 20 years ago, at least in America, and I think Australia follows, that you cannot teach any theory other than the theory of evolution. You're simply not allowed unless something is taught within a religion class, right? So any classes on tertiary or even high school levels where you are discussing species, biology, the evolution of life, then you have to revert to the standard teaching, even though, like you're saying, right, okay, so we have our few scientists who do predominate more in Sattva Gun, because they are in the minority, they do get pushed out by the predominating consensus, which is very firmly in Rajagun, which means that it has to have the ticks ticks and crosses according to the empirical research method. And that means basically that everything gets done according to the 5 senses. You know, if you can't see it, smell it, hear it, if you can't put it in a laboratory, process it in that way, then they will not teach it. Whether or not they admit that, yeah, there are gaps in our knowledge. This is actually the situation, yeah. Okay, look, thank you everyone so much. I don't know if anyone else had a question, but we are on 8:30, so I better finish up. Did somebody else have a super quick question? Yeah, Sadhana, yeah. Sorry? Sorry, go on.
I wanted to know what happened to Vishva.
Vishva,
when he fell out of the plane,
Vishwavasu.
what happened to him?
Don't have that information. You might have to find someone else to ask that from. That's true. That's true, actually.
And Nava's wings, he would have just flown back on again.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, he probably could have recovered himself and reboarded his plane. Jai. Thank you very much, everyone. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you, Sadhana.